All right, welcome to episode 50. I can't believe we're here of the Inglorious Bastards campaign. I have the privilege of having the entire original cast back with me. So I have Christian, my brother, who played the elf Angelin. I have Josh, my friend and almost neighbor, who played the woodman Riken. Marco and Max, the two brothers. Marco played Faradir, the Dunedain.
Wait, you guys are brothers?
Shit, man, are you serious?
Oh my god. So Marco played Faradir, the Dunedain, and Max played Tessero, the Hobbit. And we have Spriggs with us, who played Burin the Dwarf. So welcome back, guys.
Good to be back.
I'm the only person in this entire party that doesn't go by their first name.
That's true.
A shame. That's just you standing out, man.
I'm just continuing the tradition. I hope that's okay.
Yeah, that's cool.
So guys, I just wanted to throw some statistics back at you here, or not really statistics, more like factoids. So it is now, we were recording this in July of 2019. We started part one, or arc one, however you want to say it, of the trilogy, Search for Tola Eressëa, back in June of 2017.
Holy shit.
Can you believe it's been 2 years?
Yeah, it does not seem like it was that long ago. Time flies.
And part of that I think is because we actually took a fair amount of time off. So we took off September, October, November, and December. We took off 4 months between part one and part two. And then we ended up playing straight through part two and part three. So, really we've only been done playing for about a year.
Crazy. Yeah, we played for a long time, and I actually missed some of it towards the end there too, didn't I?
You did, but
we had like a couple sessions where some people could be there and others couldn't, and we just kind of.
It made story sense for me to not be there, though. I guess Riken was sort of out of it for a bit there.
Yeah, you had the absolute shittiest luck of anybody in the party.
He was only mostly dead. It's a
but I mean,
bad that could happen.
Shittiest, but also I don't know, I think I would argue that Riken actually set everything into motion, kind of.
In a good way and a bad way. I mean, I always think back on this too. It's like I always felt guilty. I felt like the whole party was at fault for a lot of this. And I mean, I guess it's kind of true, like part of the story, right? We performed the ritual that set the whole shitstorm in motion, didn't we?
Yeah,
that was kind of like I always felt kind of responsible for that.
But I mean, I guess we kind of have to ask ourselves, just like we talk, we think about sort of how much free will do we actually have in the real world. It's kind of like, if you're trying to prevent something from happening, are you causing it? Just are you inching closer to that thing that you're trying to avoid?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, I have a few questions here that I just want to throw out there, and it can just be it can be kind of a free-for-all or a buffet-style podcast. So we'll, and I've asked each one of you guys this individually at the various points that I've interviewed you. But I guess of this first arc, Search for Tola Eressëa, is there any favorite parts that you guys want to throw out there?
As far as a personal moment with my character, I really liked, because I was so inept at combat the whole thing. I remember I was chasing somebody, and I basically just, it wasn't even a normal combat maneuver. I asked you if I could run and slide off of this ledge and land and incapacitate this guy, and you were basically yeah, it's gonna take a pretty good roll though. And I just remember nailing the roll, and it was so surprising because I had been so lackluster prior to that. So I really enjoyed that moment.
That was pretty early on, actually. So we weren't sure how the characters were going to end up at that point, I think.
Yeah. I just know I was struggling early on in our fights, just learning to play. It was a different character than what I was used to playing, but I thought that was a fun moment.
It's funny too, because I feel like Riken struggled a lot too in combat.
Oh, dude, you played with loaded dice, the worst loaded dice.
I know.
They were
I know, but
terrible.
it made so much sense in the long run. It really all kind of came together. Like he struggled so much, and he struggled to be useful in combat. Although I think like his best combat moment was like, and I say this with like online air quotes here, like scurrying up the cliff to pull that dude off the cliff, which actually took like 3 turns. Do you remember?
Oh, I remember. You guys were at Eredor's End, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so. We're like, I'm like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna climb up the cliff and pull the guy down by his ankle, and you're like, well, the cliff's like 20 feet high, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna do it anyway.
Half movement speed over 3 turns. We're gonna do it.
It's very
I think for Vernon, it wasn't even like a single moment. It was like playing this almost real story or like history of, you know, this forgotten character.
Vern definitely had a cool arc too.
Yeah, the character building behind him, there's so much depth to it, and you know, it's not even all revealed yet, and that's what's so great about it.
Yeah,
I agree. I think that kind of like applies to the whole campaign in general. Like I felt like the whole campaign kind of came across as like a forgotten tale. Like you know, that's a credit to you, Jared, for fitting it in so well. I mean, I think you fitted into the existing lore so well that at the end, in particular at the end, it kind of came across as this great tale that happened that no one ever really told anybody about. You know, like in the history of Middle Earth, like no one ever really spoke of this thing that happened because it kind of always just happened behind the scenes, even though it was pretty epic in the long run. You know,
doesn't it? It makes you wonder on all those sort of those gaps that Tolkien left, like how many of these adventures actually happened.
Yeah. And I think that's great, the way that you set up your story too, is like Tolkien stories have a knack for like leaving you wanting more, or like more tidbits about certain characters or what certain adventures might have been. And I think there was a lot, especially with the characters that some of these guys developed, and there was just a lot of breadcrumbs that, you know, made you want more, which, you know, we get down the line with the second and third installment. But
yeah, for sure.
So I got to be honest. You know, I've started thinking like prequel. So like we're
prequel to the prequel.
so we're just finishing the first arc. We have 2 more arcs to go, so another 100 episodes probably. And I'm already thinking like, you know, we just scratched just the tip of Pterodon and who he was and how he even came to this knowledge of his wager. And you know, there couldn't be a better time to play a prequel than maybe when the Amazon series that is set in the Second Age comes out. So I'm just to let you guys know, I'm already thinking of this like a year or 2 down the line. Yeah.
Just for the recruiting pitch.
I'm going to just expand that first question. So in case anybody else wants to chime in, I asked about sort of favorite parts, but you could expand that. Favorite battles, favorite NPCs, favorite items, anything you want to, you know, if there's something that maybe you haven't gotten a chance to talk about or something that had just come to mind, you know.
My bitch was the best NPC.
Your bitch.
Grimwald was the best NPC of the game.
I don't know. I'm all in on Goldberry and Tessero.
Marco.
That fanfic.
Marco, go ahead.
I remember, what's his name, Griswold?
Grimold.
I remember Grimold like bited me 20 times or something.
Oh no, was that Tarminoth or was that Griminoth?
It was both of them, because he turned into Tarminoth after he killed the first Tarminoth.
Yeah, yes, he did.
Yeah. We was bit like 20 times. It was only the last time that I got infected.
Yeah.
I was so happy.
I think Riken was like the only one that never got infected, right?
Yeah, he was the only one that didn't get bit or infected in some way. I think just bit.
I have to ask, was that whole thing fleshed out before Grimwald became my little story?
So the idea originally was to infect one of you in the original battle. And when it didn't happen, I remember talking to Vic right after that. Grimold did, your squire, I should say. You call him your bitch, which I'm really nervous about on this podcast, I'll be honest. But anyway, so it was your squire officially. And he did get bit. And I ended up contacting Vic and being like, look, so we're going to say that Grimold got infected. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but you guys gave me a lot of shit for this because I quote unquote slipped when I said we were rolling perception rolls and we were talking about Grimold, and I said, do you smell anything? Do you guys remember this? And you guys were like, what do you mean smell? Ha ha, you know, like what were you thinking? So very early on, like he was transforming already at night when you guys would be asleep. He would go out and be infecting people, right? Like that was the plan. But yeah, he was already he already had keen senses of a canine, and so as early as the Fords of Eisen, he was already starting to have these keen senses.
I thought the whole Tessero's cloak thing was a really cool.
Oh my god, I loved that.
Yeah, and it really shaping character, I think, in the second and third parts, which is also god.
He received the cloak and instantly turns into a tree.
Yeah.
Oh, I laughed out loud at the time.
Yeah, Christian had some great one-liners in this whole. I mean, some of your comments about the Urukai, hysterical.
I laughed about that for weeks after we did that. That stupid picture that somebody sent of him staring at the Urukai, and we were talking about where he was touching him with the handprint. Man, that got me so good.
I remember I made that while you guys were talking, and I was just like, I gotta send this in right now. And,
I just want that scene on the extended editions of the Two Towers.
Oh man! Well, I haven't done a lot of editing in terms of when a bunch of guys, nerdy guys, get together and we're sitting around playing Dungeons and Dragons, somebody's gonna make comments that might be offensive to some people. So and nobody means anything by it, but I haven't done a lot of editing, but I have kind of cut out pieces that I figure would.
I think what he's saying is he cut that part out.
there have been just a few parts that I've cut out because obviously this group doesn't mean any offense to anybody, especially the bitch comment. Like that was unfortunately there are no females in this campaign, and it wasn't even directed toward a female. So I just want that out there.
We ended up changing it to Grimold, son of bitch. So that
which I'm not sure is any better, really.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on. Let's if you could think of an area of the country that you guys traveled through that was the most interesting or most flushed out, most vivid in your memory when you're remembering this campaign, what would that be?
I remember the massive trap room where we all got spun on that thing. I don't really remember for sure how you described it, but I have this image of it in my head of the giant wheels on the floors and just getting smashed into the wall. For some reason that always stuck with me. I know it was not even really a totally critical moment, but in my head the space was massive. I pictured this huge open area that we were underneath the tower.
Yeah, so that was in the catacombs of Orthanc, and Pterodon had protected his last remaining, his shield, the actual shield that was sort of your last piece to collect before you could do the ritual, and he had protected it with these elaborate traps, and one of them, the one you're talking about, was like a merry-go-round, right?
Yeah.
That spun
very fast merry-go-round.
Very fast. Yeah. And I think Spriggs Byrne probably had that was his.
That was my moment. I was gonna have the greatest moment in the first arc, and then the dice just didn't want me to have it.
I just remember Jared being and you get smashed into this wall over here.
I was I'm gonna ice pick this thing with my axe. It's gonna be great. And nope.
And you not only did you get flung into the wall, but after you hit the wall, you fell back onto this thing, and then ended up getting hit another wall, and then eventually got thrown off.
Yeah, I got ejected finally.
Yeah, that was fun, and that was the episode too that Riken fell under mind control of this illusion, and Tessero ended up breaking him out with some pipe weed.
The hardest part of this story was the whole Riken's dad thing. That was crazy.
Yeah,
I actually knew Riken's Riken's arc was so dark, man.
It was. Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, but it's like, I like when we were talking about the favorite parts, like that particular like encounter was definitely my favorite part as for the character in particular, like finding the bones of his father and his brother, and finding out his brother was insane, and then finding out that his father was tormented by this horrible creature. Like,
Oh my
totally screwed up.
Riken had so much loss in this campaign.
Yeah.
How many times did your dog die?
All the times.
Every time I gave him back to you. I want to just bring up like some of the creatures that you guys came across, right? Like we mentioned Tarmanoth, the great wolf that was made in the likeness of the original werewolf, Karkaroth. We talked about the Avathari that didn't really have a name because it sort of was around before things got names, that they referred to as more Ulun, the creature in the well. And then there was the arguably like the big bad. We don't want to give away the final big bad quite yet, but the big bad of this campaign was also nameless at first, and through the second and the third arcs, he became named, and we eventually named him Gwarthour, which we'll bring up again, but. For you guys, like which of those creatures was the most visceral and like ominous, I guess is the right word.
For Anglin, I think, not to take away from the other threats, but the creature in the well played like a direct impact in the story that kind of we built the character around. So I think that was like most satisfying for me, getting to play that and experience that.
It's also a very Tolkien thing to do, right? I mean, the Tolkien narrative is like very specific, but there's always these other things. There's always more depth. There's no matter who you are. I mean, you're the Fellowship, like essentially saving the world. No matter who you are, there's always something beyond you out there.
There's always something you feel small.
Yeah, exactly. And that was definitely a moment where it was like, yeah, okay, whatever we're doing here, this thing's on a different level, it's totally different. Comes from a different place. Different time, and that was cool. I love that.
The Watcher. I think the Watcher is really cool.
Oh, yeah. So the
bridge fight.
That's right. That was. I think that was in a place called Tharbad, and just right on the edge of where were we? Dunland, I think. Is that right? That was one of Faradyr's known lands. I think we were just getting back in his known lands. So
the other Dunedain were there, right?
Yeah, you actually I think encountered.
Estelle.
Yeah, I think you encountered Aragorn at some point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess let me ask about throughout the different arcs. I tried to throw different riddles at you, and riddles are probably not my strong suit, but I would dare say that the very basis of the first arc was based on a riddle, and that is of course Pterodon's wager. We had that which escaped the void. That which has the greatest gift, that which is at the heart of us all, I think was one of the clues, and what was that which sees across the straight road, I think was one of them. So it was like the 4 points of Pterodon's wager. I'm curious, how long it took you to figure it out, and was there any one particular, clue that sort of tipped you off to one of the pieces of the wager?
Maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like we did a pretty good job, like picking up. At some point, it kind of dawned on all of us what was going on. Maybe I'm just like misremembering it though. But
I think I remember picking up on one or two of them early on, but some of them are a bit more fuzzy.
Yeah, I think you probably like the second time we played, you guys ended up coming across both the Elendil stone and Angwarel, the sword. So you had two of them right away, and then when you crossed over the Misty Mountains, you guys ended up with what I shouldn't have called the Durin stone, because there's already a Durin stone. It's that obelisk at the Mirror, but it was sort of the sister stone to the Arkenstone. You remember that Byrne found?
Yeah, I thought that was a really cool concept too.
I should have come up with something a lot more creative for the name of that stone, but I so you ended up with 3 of them right away. And then the 4th thing, I think it was Marco figured it out when you guys were in the catacombs, and that was that which has the greatest gift. So you guys, you told a story about the halls of Mondos, remember, and how humans are not tied to this world.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
You were the one to figure that out.
The gift of Iluvatar to mankind was actually death, or the concept of moving on from this world.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the last battle. It takes place at the Grey Havens. You end up fighting this shadow creature who transforms into Burin's. We rolled for this, and Burin was the one that it looked at when you first summoned the shadow creature, and it kind of like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, it picked Burin's worst fear. So, Spriggs, do you remember what the shadow creature turned into?
A Balrog.
Yeah, and so Burin, ostensibly being the son of Balin, who would have either had first-hand knowledge of or second-hand knowledge of Durin's Bane, which was the Balrog in Moria. And so, if you had to really look inside of Burin and know what his greatest fear was, it probably would have been a Balrog. So this creature took the form of the Balrog in the final fight. And you got a clue as to how to close this portal to Tol Eressëa. You knew you had to close this portal, and you knew you had to put an end to this Balrog in the shadow. And so, what do you remember about that final battle?
I remember jumping in. That's all I remember.
And
So
I remember at some point I don't even think it was the right choice to be honest. But I was just committed. I was like, I'm going in there, I guess. Like this is what this comes down to.
Well, I think at one point either Círdan or Gildor and Glorian had told the group that the ritualist needed to, essentially take one of the items through the portal.
Was it the elf one that they had held captive?
Oh, Irame. That's correct. Yeah, that was Irame. Yeah. And so Irame is a character that came from Adventures in Middle-earth, who I believe is a Noldor elf who has ties to Aman. She was kind of making a pilgrimage through Middle-earth proper, and you guys met her early on in a couple of your origin sessions, and she comes into this and acts as kind of like the Phil Coulson catalyst when she's murdered on the ship, right? And of course I'm making a Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. reference. You guys kind of get upset and start attacking the Umbarians and start battling the shadow and close the portal.
You were kind enough to provide something to keep me from being too worthless during that fight. that epic ballista was quite helpful for making Angolan contribute.
And has quite the history. Do you remember? The name of it was Guerist, and it came from Burin's people.
Did they make it as a gift for the elves, was it?
They did. It came from the Blue Mountains. It was, I believe it was one of Thorin's company's grand ballistas that they gifted to the elves of Linden.
Yeah, it was
we were being possessed during the fight. and I remember that my helm actually came in handy because it was fire resistant.
That's right. You had an ancient dwarven helm, which the dwarves of old used to wear into battle against some of the first dragons, right? The fire drakes. Yeah. At the end of the battle, we have the Umbarians defeated. We have the portal closed. We have the shadow, we think, defeated. And you guys are sort of licking your wounds, and Gildor and Glorian and Círdan sort of bring you in, and they say, your friend has gone on to Tol Eressëa. He has basically taken a shortcut, if you can call it that, through this portal that you guys have opened by doing the ritual, and he was stranded over in Tol Eressëa. It's actually much more complicated than that, and we'll find out more about that in part 2. But you guys decide to get on a ship and sail across the straight road to Tol Eressëa. And during the battle, Círdan actually whispers 2 words. They were Dagarath and Mormagil. And at the time, did you guys know what either of those were?
I think I had an idea. I had heard Mormagil before, I think, but the other I was pretty in the dark about.
People thought I was the return of the Mormagil.
Well, it was, the second campaign is called Rise of the Mormagil, and, I don't want to ruin anything, but, it is possible to take that more than one way, because Faradir had a black blade, right? And that's what Mormagil means, is the black blade, right? So it could have been a reference to Turin Turnabar. It could have been that you were being called the new Mormagil, right?
I don't want to give anything away.
Tune in to find out.
Going forward in part 2, Rise of the Mormagil, I believe the only person that sat out so far was Christian, Angelin's character.
Yes, Angelin, yeah. He ended up going back and studying some of the libraries and some of the ancient tomes and stuff. So
the stone from Elistirion, the Elindial stone, was tasked in your care, right? It was given to you for, eventually it actually does sail across the straight road with, I believe, Elrond, finally. And we will learn much more about all of the other characters going forward in part 2, Rise of the Mormagil. So thank you guys for coming. I appreciate you taking the time to 2 years later recap this. All right, guys. Good night.
Have a good one, man.
Night. Thanks.
Let me know when it's time for the prequel.
All right.
That's right.